At this very moment, Trump is on stage, beating his chest, asserting that he's standing strong against China, confronting Beijing directly. But behind the scenes, the truth tells a different story. He's begging China to continue sending vital products to the United States. Consider that for a second. Launching a trade war while depending on your adversary for rare earths, magnets, and components essential to American industry. Meanwhile, even as he requests these supplies, he threatens to impose a 200% tariff on those very goods if shipments stop. It's a paradox that could have serious repercussions. This isn't happening in a vacuum. The US dollar, once the undisputed global reserve currency, is losing ground. Investors who once scrambled to hold dollars are now retreating. Demand is decreasing. Confidence is eroding. A time may come when markets treat the dollar as a burden rather than an asset, something they need to be compensated to hold. What was once a symbol of American power is now an asset investors want to avoid. Beneath this surface, America's financial bedrock is fragile, while Beijing strengthens the yuan and tightens its hold on U.S. assets, leaving Washington in a weaker position. The risks are mounting and the leverage is fading fast. Trump talks tough, but his desperation is clear. Recently, he warned that if China stops exporting magnets, the U.S. will respond with a 200% tariff. That kind of retaliation wouldn't just be painful. It would destroy profit margins, freeze trade flows, and destabilize markets worldwide. This threat came right after a meeting with South Korea's president, revealing more anxiety than confidence. Analysts saw this not as strength, but as a sign Trump is losing leverage. When you look at the facts, the concern is justified. China controls approximately 90% of the world's supply of rare earth magnets. Not only mining, but also their refining, processing, advanced technologies, and patents. It's not just about extracting minerals. It's about transforming them into the essential materials modern technology depends on. Without China's cooperation, U.S. supply chains don't just slow, they collapse. Trump tries to show power, even suggesting he could ground Chinese planes by cutting off Boeing parts, only to retreat and say the relationship is strong. That's not strength. It's a precarious balancing act on a rope fraying over a supply system in danger of failure. Behind the scenes, Washington is racing to build alternatives, investing hundreds of millions into domestic rare earth projects, supporting companies like MP Materials, Neocorp, and USA Rare Earth with loans, guaranteed purchase agreements, and government price supports. Officials have dubbed it a Manhattan Project for rare earths, underscoring the urgency. Congress and the Pentagon have allocated billions more to secure supply chains, eyeing new mining opportunities in Greenland and the Democratic Republic of Congo. A decade-long agreement is in place to ship Greenland's heavy rare earths to a Defense Department-backed plant in Louisiana for processing. But the reality remains. Despite all this investment, the U.S. is far from producing enough to replace China. Industry experts warn that it will take years before America can meet even a fraction of its demand. Until then, the gap must be filled by Beijing. The markets already sense this vulnerability, as stock futures have dropped, signaling worry. At the same time, Trump unexpectedly removed a Federal Reserve governor, officially over fraud allegations but really to tighten control over monetary policy amid rising economic uncertainty. This battle isn't abstract or theoretical. It affects everyday life. Rare earth magnets power your smartphone, electric vehicles, medical devices, and defense systems. If supply falters, production grinds to a halt, prices spike, and the economy spirals toward disorder. So here's the question. How safe do you feel knowing that the materials underpinning modern technology are concentrated in China's hands, while the U.S. threatens its own supplier? This is a risky game with enormous stakes, and magnets are only part of the story. China is playing a much bigger game. Last Friday, China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology rolled out new regulations on rare earths. These rules don't just cover ore mined within China, but also materials sent there for processing. This is crucial because China isn't just the top miner. It's the global hub for processing, turning raw ore into usable metals, oxides, and high-tech components that industries worldwide rely on. The new framework imposes strict production quotas, formal approvals, and detailed reporting on volumes moved. Miscompliance and firms face penalties, including reduced quotas. Effectively, Beijing now controls who can access rare earth materials, how much they get, and when shipments occur. All this happens as the U.S. struggles to secure enough supply to keep factories and defense programs running. Why the timing? Because Washington has tightened restrictions on China's access to advanced technology. In April, after Trump expanded tariffs to multiple trading partners, Beijing retaliated by adding 7 more rare earth minerals to its restricted list, citing national security and misuse concerns. This wasn't accidental. It was a calculated response. In 2024, about 70% of America's rare earth supply came straight from China. The rest arrived from Malaysia, Japan, Estonia, but much of that material either originated in or passed through Chinese refineries. The supply chain often runs through Beijing. Domestically, China is clamping down hard. July saw a Ministry of State Security crack down on smuggling, labeling it a national security issue. That shows how critical this sector has become. No more unofficial exports, only state-controlled flows. Abroad, China is expanding control at the source, investing and securing supply deals worldwide. The message is clear. While the US threatens, China builds. While Washington scrambles, Beijing consolidates. This is a global struggle with massive stakes, and time is running out. Throughout Africa, Chinese corporations are rapidly advancing their ambitions. They are not merely securing mining contracts. They are investing in infrastructure, embedding themselves within local economies, and locking in long-term supply agreements that guarantee access to crucial future resources. Chinese investment in Africa's mining sector has now exceeded $10 billion, reflecting both determination and strategic intent. The Democratic Republic of Congo, Zimbabwe, and Botswana have emerged as central hubs within this network. For example, in the DRC, Chinese enterprises dominate cobalt extraction, a mineral vital to electric vehicle batteries, energy storage, and the global shift to green technology. Meanwhile, U.S. investments in African critical minerals during the same period were just $300 million. One nation is establishing comprehensive control over the entire supply chain. The other is still piecing together its presence. This is significant. Africa holds nearly 30% of the world's reserves of essential minerals, lithium, cobalt, nickel, rare earth elements, and whoever controls extraction and processing there will influence the future of clean energy, electronics, and defense industries worldwide. China grasps this reality perfectly. It is executing a two-pronged strategy. Within its borders, it tightens export limits and boosts regulatory enforcement while maintaining dominance over processing facilities. Internationally, it acquires stakes in mines, transport infrastructure, contracts, and political alliances. This combined approach, internal command plus external resource securing, gives Beijing a strategic advantage, leaving Washington with fewer viable options. Is the US able to close this gap? Not quickly. Developing new mines can take a decade or more. Building refineries demands massive investment, specialized expertise, and navigating complex environmental regulations. Local communities raise concerns. Political opposition slows progress. Capital flows cautiously. Meanwhile, industries worldwide require refined materials now, not in 5 or 7 years. The immediate danger is obvious. If China restricts exports or diverts supplies, U.S. industries will suffer instantly, facing production delays, soaring electric vehicle prices, and shortages for defense manufacturing. This is the power China has cultivated. It sets the rules domestically and secures resources globally. It owns the choke points, controls flows, and dictates timing. Washington, in contrast, relies on tools like tariffs, blunt instruments that can influence prices but do not create new mines or refineries, nor transfer decades of specialized know-how overnight. Without control over the supply chain, tariffs amount to political theater rather than effective strategy. Time is not America's ally. But this story extends beyond minerals into finance, where China is making bold moves that signal a shift in global positioning. While the US dollar shows signs of weakening, under pressure from rate cuts, mounting debt, and investor fatigue, Beijing has chosen the opposite path. Instead of devaluing the yuan to maintain export competitiveness, China is strengthening it. This defies traditional economic logic. Export-led economies usually keep their currency low to protect trade. But China has advantages the US lacks: access to inexpensive Russian energy, steady raw material supplies, and growing dominance in critical minerals. With these foundations, China can afford a stronger currency without undermining exports. This week, China's central bank acted decisively by fixing the yuan at 7.1 per dollar, the highest since last November, and the sharpest increase since January. The timing was deliberate. Just as Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell indicated likely interest rate cuts in September, causing the dollar to drop, Beijing responded by firming the yuan. The effect was swift. Offshore trading boosted the yuan to its strongest level since July. More importantly, it demonstrated that China is no longer just responding to market forces. It is shaping them. The practical outcome of a rising yuan extends beyond currency valuations. Every 1% increase in the yuan typically boosts Chinese stocks by roughly 3%. So by strengthening the yuan, Beijing is not just influencing forex markets. It is attracting capital into its own stock exchanges. It is making Shanghai and Shenzhen more appealing to global investors. At the same time, Americans face rising costs due to tariffs and a weakening dollar, while China presents itself as a stable investment destination. This contrast is becoming more evident in financial markets. Now consider the US dollar, once the cornerstone of global finance. For decades, it provided unparalleled economic power and influence. But this dominance is eroding quickly. The dollar's yield advantage is diminishing as rates fall. U.S. debt continues to grow rapidly. The scarcity that made dollars valuable is disappearing. Investors are now considering scenarios once unthinkable. A world where holding dollars requires incentives rather than confidence. Treasury markets reflect this stress. Paying interest on U.S. debt now exceeds $1.2 trillion annually. Foreign buyers are retreating. Domestic insiders propose unconventional solutions. One idea gaining momentum is linking stablecoins to treasury bonds to sustain demand. Scott Bessant, a leading strategist, has championed this approach. The concept helped drive the passage of a new stablecoin law. But what does this signal? When the U.S. government depends on cryptocurrency investors to support its debt, it raises alarms. A nation that once effortlessly financed itself is now seeking unorthodox lifelines. This is less a sign of innovation than a symptom of vulnerability. Meanwhile, tariffs increase economic pressure. In theory, they shield domestic industries. In practice, they raise costs and complicate supply chains. The average U.S. tariff now stands near 17%, impacting everything from microchips to manufacturing equipment. The consequence is widespread inflation. Manufacturers pay more for components. Consumers face higher prices. Even raw materials come with premium costs. Instead of relief, tariffs have become an additional inflationary force. Add to this a weakening dollar, and imports become more expensive. Combine tariffs with a declining currency, and you get a vicious cycle of rising costs. Inputs grow pricier, final goods cost more. The supposed protection tariffs promise never materializes. Domestic producers remain vulnerable to global market fluctuations. The broader economy feels no respite, only more inflation, compressed profit margins, and heightened uncertainty. This economic trap is increasingly apparent. Factories report shrinking profits. Consumers see prices outpace wages. Businesses once reliant on global networks now confront constant disruption. Frustration grows, but policymakers have few effective responses. Political rhetoric outpaces tangible results. This is the bigger picture. A U.S. economy strained by tariffs, pressured by a falling currency, and entangled in supply chains it does not control. This triple burden undermines America's economic standing, inflates prices at home, and exposes critical industries to foreign influence. It's not just a policy failure, it's a structural weakness. The global balance of power is shifting, and these trends are long-term. They are part of a profound reordering of economic, financial, and technological influence worldwide. Tracking these developments matters deeply, because the next chapter won't just decide trade balances or currency values. It will reshape the entire framework of the global system. The decisions made now will reverberate for decades.